thank everyone for tuning in this morning. On the program, I welcome in one of the legends in the music business. He's a musician, author, co-founding member of the musical group The Happenings. I welcome to the program David Libert. David, Brian C., honor to have you.
Hey, thanks for having me, Brian. Pleasure to be here.
Oh, the pleasure's mine, no question. So, David, before we chat about your new book titled Rock and Roll Warrior, I wanted to go back with you a bit to some music history with The Happenings, a group you co-founded which produced 9 Billboard Top 100 singles from 66 to 68, sales over 1 million copies. Very impressive to say the least, David.
Well, yeah, it's going back a bit, but we in the late '60s we were a pretty hot little act, and we had quite a few hit records. See You in September, I Got Rhythm, Go Away Little Girl, My Mammy. We were cooking there for a while.
So here you are, the 60s, early 70s. You're co-lead singer of this pop hit-making machine, The Happenings. And then you switch roles to a booking agent. Did you feel at the time you could earn more cash that way?
Well, there was a couple of years in between me leaving The Happenings and becoming a booking agent. I worked for a management company. I was actually the de facto manager of The Happenings when I was still in the band. We had gotten rid of our manager pretty early in the game, so I learned what it was like to manage a band. I was dealing with the record company and the booking agency and the concert promoters, and when I started to have creative differences with The Happenings about what direction we should be taking, I started thinking about if I left The Happenings, maybe I should be in the business end of it. I could maybe manage other bands. I was pretty sure at that point that I couldn't be a Happening forever. So I think that was when I started to take a serious look at all that. I just felt there was a lot more longevity in my career if I was in the business end rather than being a musician.
So when you left The Happenings, now when did you get associated with the group Rare Earth?
When I left The Happenings, I had a few different jobs. I was working for a management company in New York. I became the house booker for a club out in Long Island. And then I got a job, I guess around 1971, as the road manager for Rare Earth. And that was a pretty cushy job. They worked mostly weekends. They lived in Detroit. I lived in New York. I would advance their dates while from my apartment in New York. And then I'd fly out to Detroit Thursday night and do the weekend with them, and then put them back on a plane to Detroit, and I'd fly myself back to New York. So it was a pretty cool situation. It was a very nice, cushy job. They were a great band, Rare Earth, and they put on a great show, and they were really cool guys. So it was all good on a lot of different levels for me.
Yeah, and David, it's so hard to get 50-plus years of your career in this 25-minute interview. So this is just going to be snapshots of your career. You know, I'll switch from decades if that's okay.
Sure, whatever you...
Yeah, now you took on a heavy role, Alice Cooper's tour manager, which lasted 4 years. So the first question is, how did you first meet Alice Cooper?
Well, one of my friends was a booking agent named Johnny Fidel, and when I was working for Rare Earth, one day I got a call from Johnny, and he said, you know, the Alice Cooper band is looking for a tour manager. Would you be interested? And I knew a little bit about Alice Cooper because being good friends with Johnny. And I said, yeah, I realized that Alice Cooper was really about to explode into superstardom. So I took the job, and the first gig was in Atlanta, Georgia. And Shep Gordon, the manager, he said, just observe, try and figure out what's going on. You'll get the hang of it. Because I knew absolutely nothing about what I was supposed to do. To me, my first impression was a bunch of wild, crazy-looking people crawling all over all this gear and equipment like giant insects. I thought I made the biggest mistake of my life. I left my nice, cushy job with R.I.A.A for this insanity. But by the end of that week, I was starting to get a handle on everything, and of course, it turned out to be a great job. Yeah, I did it for 4 years, and it was quite an adventure.
I mean, Alice Cooper, big time. And now you were part of that revolutionary tour, the $1 Billion Babies, weren't you?
I was. I did the $1 Billion Babies tour. I did the Schools Out tour, the Killer tour. I was there for Alice's most formidable years.
Yeah, and also the $1 Billion Babies tour had enormous commercial success. How important do you feel was your impact on getting that organized?
Well, that was my job, really, to keep it running like a well-oiled machine. And I think that I was able to achieve that. But it was more than that. There was lots of people on the road. It was really quite a logistical undertaking. And I think that my talent in being a tour manager was keeping everybody happy, making it fun, making it run as smoothly as possible. Being on a tour is a really grueling undertaking, and you got to remember the band is only on stage for 90 minutes. It's 22 and a half other hours, and when you're not sleeping, what are you doing? So I made it fun. I created a sense of family and camaraderie, and so there was lots of good times and partying and a lot of pranks and a lot of humor and a lot of laughs. I think that's the key to running a good tour, is that everybody is happy that you're there, making it as much fun and as smooth as possible.
Yeah, I mean, just like putting myself in your shoes, I'm guessing it's like being a baseball manager. You have a lot of egos. You got to keep the egos in check, right?
Yeah, I suppose. But I think part of the thing that I did was, since everybody had to really depend on everybody else, there was no room for anybody to really be a prima donna. Alice certainly was not a prima donna. He just wanted to be one of the guys. And if I had to pick anybody in that band that was the easiest to work with, it would have to be Alice Cooper himself. If he was asked to be in the lobby at 8:22 in the morning, he was in the lobby at 8:22 in the morning. I think what I tried to do was make it create an environment so you really couldn't be a prima donna. You couldn't give anybody a hard time because it would affect everybody. And since we were one big family, nobody wanted to be on that tour with everybody mad at them. So everybody kind of bent over backwards to make sure that they did their job, that they were on time, and they didn't give anybody a hard time. I think that's part of the success of it, too, to create that kind of state of mind if you're going to be on a big tour. Nobody wants a whiner or a crybaby or someone who's not happy and all of that. So I did my best to make sure that didn't happen.
So you were 4 years with Cooper, and then what happened? It became too stressful? You wanted to go on separate ways? You had other endeavors at the time?
Well, at the end of each tour, which was really exhausting for a tour manager, I wanted to quit. I wanted to do other things, but Alice Cooper's manager, Shep Gordon, would bribe me to stay by giving me, more salary increases and bonuses. But I'll tell you, Brian, after 4 years, I was just burnt out. I just didn't want to do it anymore. And it got to a point where there wasn't enough money in this world that Shep Gordon could bribe me with for me to stay. I wanted to move on, And so after 4 years, I did. I decided I wanted to get into. I had learned so much from Shep Gordon. I had the world's greatest rock and roll mentor in Shep Gordon and Johnny Podell as well. Now I wanted to apply some of this hard-earned knowledge and experience to other endeavors in the music industry. It was time for me to move on.
Yeah, now the mid-'70s, around 75, 76, you were associated with George Clinton, right?
77, 78, I had opened up a booking agency, the David Libert agency, and one of my clients was Bootsy Collins and Bootsy's Rubber Band. And George was so impressed with the way I handled Bootsy that he wanted to be my client as well, Parliament Funkadelic. And that knowledge about running a booking agency, I learned from Johnny Podell, who may be the greatest agent that ever lived. So I had really good teachers. Between Shep Gordon and Johnny Podell, I learned enough to be able to run a major booking agency. And so I ended up with George Clinton, and I already had Bootsy and all of George's other funk mob variations, the Brides of Funkenstein, Parlette, just the whole funk mob contingent. And I had the Runaways, I had Edelin Champagne King, I had the Dead Boys. So I had a nice little booking agency going there for a minute.
Yeah, and then in the early 80s, now you met Prince and Sheila E. How did that come about?
I had become friends with Steve Fernoli from the management company, Cavallo, Ruffalo, and Fernoli, and they managed a Prince along with Sheila E. And when Prince was starting to really gain worldwide fame, he said to them, "You know what? You don't have time to manage Sheila E. You guys are going to be too busy managing me. I'm going to be taking up all your time. So find somebody to manage Sheila." And somehow or other, I was deemed to be an acceptable person to manage Sheila E. for them. Of course, I was still under Cavallo, Ruffalo, and Fernoli's thumb. I mean, they were really calling the shots, not me. But for some reason or other, me becoming Sheila's manager seemed to satisfy Prince enough to allow it to happen.
Yeah, and Sheila E. opened for Prince on that legendary Purple Rain tour.
Yes, she did, and that's how I actually got to know Prince a little bit. He was a very unusual guy. He was pretty tough on everybody, but he was extremely nice to me. I think it was because I was a little bit older than almost everybody else in his inner circle. And also, he knew of my close association with George Clinton, who is someone that Prince just idolized. And
really?
So I guess he didn't want to, look like a jerk in front of me. So I'm amazed that Prince even cared what I thought about him, but apparently he did. We got along very well.
And just reading about Prince, David, he was a very shy, very introverted person. Is that right? Did you find that?
Yeah, it is. It's true. He was socially awkward, and whereas Alice Cooper would play golf with Perry Como and be on Hollywood squares, Prince avoided those kinds of activities like the plague. He was very socially awkward, I guess you can put it. But he's like several people I've met. There are certain people in this world that are not very socially, don't get along that well socially. But if they're on a stage in front of 20,000 people, they become another person. That's really where they're comfortable. That's really where their home is, on that stage in front of all of these people. That's where they feel the most comfortable. It's a very strange thing, but there are a few people like that, and Prince was certainly one of them.
We're talking with the music legend, music veteran, author of Rock and Roll Warrior, David Libert, who's with us on the telephone line. So David, talk about this new book. Like I just told you before, I got my copy. Congratulations. How did this
Thank you.
book come about?
Well, for a long time, there were people saying, David, you ought to write a book. You got all these stories. You've done all these things. You've been associated with so many different famous people. I never really thought about it seriously. And then one day, my girlfriend Angie said, "You know something? They're right. You should write a book. You have a story to tell." And that was what gave me the inspiration to really sit down and put it together and write this book. And I'm really glad that I did, because I never really thought that much. I was just living my life from day to day, and I knew I was doing cool things, and it was fun. But I never really did think I had a story that other people would be interested in. But turns out they are. The book is doing great.
Oh, and isn't there talks about the book being made into a feature-length film?
It's amazing how this is getting around. I'm not really at liberty to talk about it, but everybody's asking me that. I guess in the minds of most people, it would make either a great series or a movie. And although I'm not at liberty to really talk about it, that seems to be the direction that all of this is heading. And wouldn't that be amazing? That would really be wonderful.
Oh, absolutely. And, I want to mention to all the listeners, the book is called Rock and Roll Warrior by David Libert. I picked up my copy on Amazon.com. Is there other sites that the listening audience can pick it up, David?
Sure. It's available where anybody would buy their books, like Amazon and wherever. And also, if you go to rockandrollwarrior.com, I can send you an autographed copy if that's where you buy your book. rockandrollwarrior.com, get an autographed copy signed by me personally.
There you go. And, I have a few minutes left. I want to get a couple of more in, David. I got to ask you about the Guns N' Roses story. Is that a band that got away?
Yeah, that is the band. I guess everybody in the music business has a story about the one that got away. And that was mine. I got a call from the notorious Kim Fowley one day, who was the manager and producer of the Runaways, among other things, and said, "David, go to this storage locker. It's just a few blocks away from where you live. There's a band that lives there and rehearses there. Go check them out. I think they're really something special." So I went over there, and Guns N' Roses was living in this storage locker in the storage locker complex where other bands were living. So you can imagine the partying that went on there with all these bands every night. But in spite of that, these guys were extremely disciplined when it came to their music. They rehearsed for several hours a day. They wrote really, really great songs, and you could tell there was something very special going on there. You knew that they were the real deal. And by that I mean is they were the real deal. They were never not the band. They were always Guns N' Roses, whether they were together or just individually. They were never not the band. And I think that kind of state of mind, that kind of confidence in who you are, was very infectious and a very intoxicating, a very potent elixir to anyone who interacted with these guys. You just knew that there was no way in hell they weren't going to make it. It was that overwhelming a strength, and of course I wanted to manage them. I was pretty impressed with just about everything about them. But that was one of the low points of my life. My life, as the book will tell people, has been a series of ups and downs, very high up and pretty low downs as well. And it was that point in my life I was flat broke, and I wanted to get them out of that storage locker and get them into a place where they could live properly. You know, rehearsing there was fine. Living there wasn't. There was no running water or any kind of kitchen facilities. So I tried to raise the money to, to be able to finance some of the things that needed to be done for them right away. And I was unsuccessful in doing so. And I had to make a decision, and I had to walk away because I wasn't going to be helpful enough. And they really needed someone that could really help them. So, yeah, I walked away. And in less than a year, Appetite for Destruction, their first album, was at the top of the charts, and they were becoming one of the biggest bands in the world. Guns N' Roses, the one that got away.
Oh my God! Now you talked about having low points in your life. I don't know if this is a touchy subject. How about dealing in the drugs? You got involved with that a little bit?
I did. I had lost most of my clients at the booking agency and then with the management company, and I turned to doing that, and it was a very costly decision because I ended up going to prison there for a while. Not a pleasant chapter in my life, but Brian, it was a chapter in my life, and therefore it had to be a chapter in my book if I was going to be honest about everything, and so it was. But I learned a lot of lessons from doing those kinds of things, and somehow or other, when I got out of prison, I was able to sort of crawl back into the music business and ended up on top again, whether it was dumb luck or by the grace of God, somehow or other, I landed on my feet, and I feel pretty blessed about all of that. Here I am in my retirement, living a nice, comfortable, leisurely life, and basically an animal rights activist today. I devote a lot of my time to that. I have 3 rescues myself, and I spend a lot of time looking for homes for other dogs abused and strayed, and so that's pretty much takes up a lot of my time today. But yeah, I'm a lucky guy. Somehow or other, I landed on my feet and lived to tell the story and put it in a book.
Really? So you actually went to prison, huh?
I did. I certainly did. And that was an experience like I say, it was a chapter in my life, and therefore it deserved to be a chapter in the book. I wanted to be honest about everything, and I certainly couldn't avoid it. And it's part of my past, just like every other chapter in that book.
Yeah, and I'm sorry, this would be my last question on this. Now, were you dealing in the industry, or were you doing it outside the music business?
Basically, my clients were pretty much within the music industry. At that time, it seemed like everybody was doing drugs, certainly cocaine. I don't think I knew anybody that wasn't. Of course, my circle was all people in the music industry, and it wasn't really considered as ominous as anything more than having a beer, a poke on a joint, or a snort on a line of cocaine. It all seems to be part of that whole recreational environment from people within the music industry. So, but like I say, it wasn't the best idea I had ever come up with, and I paid the price for it. And it is what it is, I guess. But
yeah, and like you mentioned, you made a successful return. You even got involved with Living Color and Vanilla Fudge, right?
I did. I became manager for both of those bands, and Carmine Appice, the drummer for Vanilla Fudge, is one of my very closest friends. and so is Will Calhoun, the drummer of Living Color. And by the way, those bands are great live bands. Living Color was one of the greatest live bands that ever existed. To see them perform was simply an amazing thing. I guess I've really been involved with bands that put on incredible live shows. Alice Cooper, of course. George Clinton was an amazingly live act. I mean, to be privy, to be at a Parliament Funkadelic show was an experience that you would never forget, because, the whole thing was just, to see the audience reaction, it practically shook the building apart where they were playing. So I was very proud of my association with all of these bands because they were so good at what they did.
Well, listen, David, it was really an honor to have you. And just to remind the audience, the book is called Rock and Roll Warrior by David Libert. Thanks so much for your time this morning, David. I really appreciate it.
Brian, it was a pleasure. Thank you for having me. And it was a lot of fun. You made my morning, Brian.
Oh, no, you made mine. And the show will be up on YouTube, on iHeart Podcast. So everyone tune in. David, thanks so much. Happy holidays.
Thank you, Brian. You too. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. David Libert, Rock and Roll Warrior. Until next week, happy collecting to all.